All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our October installment of In the Boardroom with attorney Andy Phillips and Attolles Law. My name is Sarah Diedrich Hasdorf. I'm the Director of Outreach and Member Engagement at the Wisconsin Counties Association, and we are thrilled to host In the Boardroom with our partners at Attolles Law. So today we are going to discuss a topic that I believe is really critical to the smooth operation of county government, and that is administration and organization. But before I turn it over to our presenters this afternoon, I have just a few reminders. First, if you have questions during the presentation, please type them into either the chat or the Q&A feature, and we will be monitoring questions throughout the presentation. However, we may not get to all of them until the presentation is over. Second, we are recording this webinar and placing the recording along with the PowerPoint slides on the WCA website, www.wicounties.org. Once you're on our homepage, there is a tab in the upper right called Webinars that will get you right to our In the Boardroom recordings and PowerPoint presentations. Or you can go on events and then past event materials, where again, you will find all of the In the Boardroom recordings and PowerPoints, as well as other educational materials. So we have three presenters for today's presentation. Many of you are familiar with all three of them. We have joining us today Andy Phillips and Jake Curtis from Attolles Law. Andy presents at most of the webinars in this webinar series, and you also see him on our Monday morning leadership calls. Jake has also joined us several times in this webinar series. We also have joining us today another familiar face from our Monday morning leadership calls, and that is Josh Showman. Josh is currently the Washington County Executive, but has also served as both a county administrator and an administrative coordinator. Andy, I believe you are going to kick us off, so I will turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, everybody. This isn't in the boardroom. It's not, I know Sarah described this as a webinar, and that's the format that we're using on Zoom, of course, but this is not designed to be a presentation where Jake, me, Josh, we do all the speaking and we don't have any sort of interaction with all of you that are out there. If you have questions, if you have comments, please put them into chat and Q&A, and let's have a discussion about administration and organizational options in county government. The entire topic as it relates to administration organization is something that I know I have, and I know Jake has addressed many, many times with various counties across the state, at the Counties Association Conference, in webinars. We've addressed this topic several times. And so for some of you, there are going to be elements of the discussion today that is basically a rehash of prior discussions that we've had. We're trying to introduce some new elements to the discussion as well, because we've had several counties over the past couple of years ask us, hey, we're considering going to a county administrator from a county administrative coordinator. What are the considerations? Or, hey, there's a movement within our county to move toward county executive, away from county administrator or administrative coordinator. What are the considerations? And so the considerations go far beyond the legal, what can I do? And they get into the policy or the organizational, what is best for our county. And so we want this to be more of a practical, philosophical type discussion as it relates to the differences in these organizational models, and then figuring out for your county what is going to be the best model to efficiently get the really important stuff done that you have to do day in and day out. As Sarah mentioned, we're incredibly privileged to have Josh on today, because Josh has actually served in all three positions. And so you're going to hear from the horse's mouth exactly what it's like to be an administrative coordinator, an administrator, and a county executive. We're also privileged in that Jake Curtis is a former county board member. And so unlike me, who takes on the consultant role and tells you everything, all my knowledge and everything, not based on actual experience, we got two people with actual experience who are going to tell you from their perspective what works well, what may not work so well, and the different considerations that go into this entire model. So before we kick it off, I'm going to start with you, Josh. Anything that you want to add prior to kicking this off?
Well, since I'm the horse in this discussion, I appreciate being on and appreciate the opportunity. So looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. And for whatever reason, your audio was broken up a bit on my end. Jake, was Josh broken up for you too?
Yeah.
So we gotta figure out how to get broadband to Washington County at some point. We'll figure that out down the line. Jake, anything you wanted to add before we kick off?
Yeah, I guess two things. I would definitely agree. As we've been kind of working with our county clients across the state, this definitely continues to. This isn't a new issue, as everybody knows, but I think certainly in the counties that probably it's probably fair to say more that have administrative coordinator model, and then are looking to maybe revisit how they're organized. There's a lot of questions that come up, and we try to answer those the best we can. But our approach always has been, right, every county is going to kind of approach things differently. It's going to be kind of unique, and they're going to have to model it exactly to how they think fits best for them. But I would say it's definitely, like, as we've worked with our county clients on any number of issues, right? Investigations, personnel matters, there always kind of is this component of, are we organized correctly? And maybe we're organized correctly, but maybe we can even do things a little better, more efficiently. And so I definitely have seen, let's just say, an uptick in kind of this conversation across the state. I guess the second thing I would add is, when we have given these presentations, Andy, I think you and I have also focused on, really doing just a complete review of county operations, which includes, your committee structure. I don't know how deeply we'll get into that today, but I know a number of our clients that we're talking to right now are kind of reviewing how that committee structure is set up within their overall administrative model. And we always emphasize that there's no perfect response to, what's the right committee structure. Part of our model that we kind of go around the state presenting on is the Ozaki model. And the benefit that we have is, I was actually on the board when we went through that, and we went from something like 30 committees to 5. Now, is that going to be the right approach for every county? No. But it's just simply a good example of how, when you're going through kind of an administrative review of how you're organized, you can also look at your committee structure and how that committee structure actually complements the overall administration.
Good points, Jake. Very good points. So let's start with this slide. And I want to emphasize this because this is what's lost on everybody. Consistently, I shouldn't say everybody, but consistently lost in the entire discussion, is that county government is unique. There is no public sector comparable. There's no private sector comparable. There's no nonprofit comparable. If you look at chapter 59 of the statutes, it's entirely different in the way that county government is structured as compared to our friends in municipal government, as compared to our friends in state government, and certainly as compared to the federal government. Counties are unique. When you look at the corporate structure in chapter 180 of the statutes that govern business corporations, or chapter 181 that governs nonprofit corporations, entirely different structure than county government. And so just because you hear or see that somebody is doing something a certain way and say, well, that's what we should use in our county. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have that discussion, but let's not automatically assume that we can simply take county government and graft onto it a system that prevails in another public sector entity, or for that matter, another private sector entity. So it's unique. Because it's unique, I think that we have to have more discussions like this, so we have clarity and an understanding of the various roles and responsibilities within our organization. I mean, you have governance considerations as it relates to the county board. You have governance considerations as it relates to the relationship between your county board and administration. And you have organizational considerations that relate to how it is that you are going to organize in terms of chain of command to, again, efficiently provide services to the public. Oh, and by the way, we have constitutional officers that are elected at large within our county. Where do they fit on the organizational chart? And so again, counties are unique, and there's a lot of misunderstandings out there about how county government ought to operate. But ultimately, if we have the right discussions and put the right organizational and governance models in place, we're going to do a really good job. And I see it happen in 72 counties all around this state all the time. We do a really good job efficiently delivering services, and we don't get enough credit for doing that job, given the pile of confusion that the legislature's provided us in Chapter 59. So,
Andy, if
go
you
ahead,
don't
Jeff.
mind, I think that's a good point. Your last bullet is probably the highlight of the entire presentation, because the work that counties do, and you think through the programs that we deliver, the services, as you just alluded to, that are provided, making sure that outcome, not necessarily the outputs, how many people come to the counter, or how many licenses are given out every day, but what is the service delivery that you're giving to the constituent? That needs to be the focus, and everything works backwards to that. So I think to Jake's point, in one county, particularly, for example, in a smaller county where there's less people, maybe less budget numbers, it's more easily managed by a county board, that the administrative coordinator makes all the sense in the world. And as you grow in complexity and size, dollars and people, more structure may make sense at some point in time. I think there's tipping points, and being cognizant of those tipping points, including the final one, at least as we're authorized in statute with moving to county executive. I think that's been the evolution that we've experienced in Washington County. When I got here 10 years ago, we were still an administrative coordinator. That's what I was hired as, was an administrative coordinator. And just like Jake explained, in Ozaukee County, it was very heavily committee oriented. There are 10 standing committees, something like close to 30, maybe less formal committees. It was very diffuse power structure. Department heads had a lot of authority, but we had grown so much over time that authority was kind of all over the place, both formal and informal. And if you didn't understand, if you're a brand new county supervisor elected into the model, it would take years just to try to understand the terrain, the internal politics, forget the external politics. So as we graduated to a county administrator form of government, it was really about chain of command and ensuring that the bureaucracy responds to the elected county board, and is ensuring that those outcomes, once again, so I refer to it oftentimes as citizen service, not customer service, because it's a two-way relationship, but that citizen service is delivered. And that's the ultimate accountability of an elected official, isn't it? Is making sure that the system, the bureaucracy is responsive, is delivering those services that Andy alluded to a few minutes ago, those programs that define that last bullet here. So I think as you're contemplating in your county specifically, how best do we structure ourselves? Start with why, to steal a phrase from Simon Sinek, start with that last bullet point, the citizen service, the program delivery. How best do we achieve that? And it may very well be a looser administrative coordinator position works in your county, because you have your hands on the ground and you're much closer to things. And maybe it's, we just need some more structure. We need a chain of command here to make sure that there's so much we do. We got to make sure every piece, every delivery system is working for those programs. I think that is the maturation process we went through Washington County, and I would encourage you to always start with why.
Good points, Josh. Thank you for that. I want to start with the foundation from a legal perspective as to what can you do. So let's get that away. Not what should you do, but what can you do? If we look at the Constitution, it provides a lot of authority to the legislature to regulate county government. And I think that this makes a lot of people irritated, and rightfully so, because what we do as counties, a lot of it is independent of the state. I mean, a lot of what we do is mandated by the state, but a lot of it is independent of the state. So for me to sit here as a lawyer and say, look, the Constitution provides full authority to the legislature to regulate the heck out of county government, a lot of people say, well, that's not right. That's not how it should be. We exist as counties separate and apart from the state. Okay, but let's understand that, again, going back to 1848 and thinking about the nature of county government as the local presence of the state of Wisconsin in the various regional locales throughout the state, because remember, in 1848, It took a really long time for an email to get from Madison up to Superior, so they needed a local presence up there in order to deliver services. The way that we were set up under our Constitution is that the legislature has the ability to confer upon the boards of supervisors of the several counties in the state powers of a local legislative and administrative character as they shall from time to time prescribe. All right, that's very important. Article 4, Section 22, because what the legislature did then in the mid-1980s, I think in recognition of the complexities associated with the delivery of services at the county level, is they provided counties with administrative home rule authority. Up until those mid-1980s, we did not have a clear delineation of executive legislative branches within county government. We had some counties that had county executives in the mid-80s. Milwaukee County was the only county that was ever mandated to have a county executive, but we had several other counties that had county executives in the mid-80s. But then I think that there was a lot of concern that we didn't really have a good chain of command, if you will. And I know that both Josh and Jake have served our country. Thank you both very much for your service, but they appreciate that phrase when I use it, chain of command. If you look at it from a military standpoint, you've got to have a solid chain of command as to who's making those critical decisions at critical times. And so the legislature opened up Chapter 59 and said, well, who is the decision making here? You mean I have to go to a board, which in the mid-1980s, we had several boards that were in the mid to upper 30s. I had to go to this 30-plus member board and ask for a decision? Oh my gosh, nothing is ever going to get done. I'm not talking about policy decisions. Those have always belonged to the legislative branch in county government, the county board. I'm talking about the day-to-day administration of counties. Is that if you did not have a clear chain of command or clear authority within the statutes, that it became unwieldy to have to go to the county board with every single concern. And so again, in the mid-80s, the legislature said, we're going to give counties the freedom and flexibility to design their administrative structure in the way that they best see fit. Now, of course, we're not going to give counties complete autonomy. We're going to say that if there is a matter of statewide concern that we, the legislature, address in statute, counties have to follow our lead on that matter of statewide concern. But as it relates to your own internal administrative or organizational affairs, you have the ability as a county to do what it is. And Jake, you're not on mute, so I can hear you in the background. But you have the ability to organize as you on the organizational forms of county government as it relates to the freedom that were provided to counties in the mid-1980s to organize as they see fit. The legislature said you have freedom, but you have to choose one of three paths here. You can either be a county executive county, a county administrator county, or everybody else, which is an administrative coordinator county. And the legislature created three separate statutes dealing with those three different forms: county executive under 5917, county administrator under 5918, and then everybody else was administrative coordinator 59.19. And before you get upset about how I'm saying everybody else and it's all the leftovers and administrative coordinator, wait till I get to the statutory language in 5919, and you can understand why it is that I'm describing it along those terms. So if we look at the map of Wisconsin today, this is today in terms of the breakout, if you will, of the various administrative options that counties have selected throughout the state of Wisconsin. We've got 12 elected county executives. We've got 33 appointed county administrators, and we've got 7 appointed administrative coordinators. And you're going to look at that and say, wait a minute, that adds up to 52, and we have 72 counties. What are you talking about? Well, again, let's define here. Remember, I said everybody else is administrative coordinator, and I said when we get to the statutory language, you're going to understand why I described it that way. Well, that's because you have the ability as a county, again, under 59.03 of the statutes, to organize as you see fit. And if you want to give an administrative coordinator administrative authority separate and apart from that coordinator holding a different position in county government, you can do that. And there are several counties that do that. They have full-time administrative coordinators within their county. There are 7 of them throughout the state. And then we also have 20 counties that have what we call part-time or dual role administrative coordinators. We have 10 counties whose county clerks serve as administrative coordinator, 4 counties whose board chairs serve as coordinator, and then the balance here, we even have some highway commissioners that serve as administrative coordinators. And so the point is if you add up all of these numbers, we've got 12 execs, 33 administrators, 27 administrative coordinators. So at this point, more counties have professional administration than don't have professional administration. When I define professional administration, I'm talking about dedicated full-time staff serving as the head of the administrative branch within county government. There used to be a time not so long ago where at least a plurality, and even go back a little bit further, it's a majority of the counties, did not have full-time administrative staff. And you might ask yourself, well, why is that? Why is it that we've seen that shift or that change? And it really gets back to what Josh started his discussion with, and that is county government's complex. I mean, I envy the heck out of board supervisors who go to that very first board meeting and are presented with a resolution asking for a budgetary transfer within human services of $450,000 because they had 2 emergency mental health commitments that had to go to Winnebago that month. Because those words are all from the English language, but if I'm new to county government, I have no idea what they mean. And so the complexities, and that's just one example, by the way. If you look throughout county government, the services that we provide are so incredibly complex and they're different. This is also, by the way, what separates us from state government, federal government and stuff. One day we're dealing with human services, next day it's the sheriff's office, next day it's a land use issue and zoning, next day it's a conservation issue. I mean, we deal with some really diverse stuff in county government. And so as those issues became more complex, and frankly, as the dollar signs attached to those decisions became greater and greater, I think a lot of counties said, look, this is just too much as a board of supervisors to absorb and make an informed policy decision without some professional help. So let's get some professional help in here. That's a person that we can trust to run our budget, to make recommendations, to dig into policy issues and give us the information we need to make an informed policy decision. So I think that's why we've seen a gradual move toward what we like to call professional administration. Josh, anything you wanted to add to that? Because I know that's a topic that's near and dear to your heart.
It is, yeah, thank you. And I think what you're seeing on this map, and I am evidence of here in Washington County, having gone through all 3 forms of government, is different boards, and we are changing boards every 2 years. Different boards have different opinions. I think we've gotten 16 messages while Andy was talking that Vernon County has switched to a full-time administrative coordinator. So I think that just proves the point that I know of several counties that have switched multiple times in the 10 years I've been in county government, but it's really a matter of perspective for the individual county and the elected supervisors at that time. Although I will say, once you move to county executive, there's no going back. So without the people acting, so it is fluid. It is really, as Jake started with, it's customized to the needs of every county. That's the beauty of the way that the statutes are structured, and it changes quite frequently. We see it all across the state. But I agree with Andy. Over time, the state's just made it more and more complicated to do this work, and to do it well, you have to have somebody you trust in leadership roles driving the organization.
Well, and let me just say that Nikki was kind enough to point out to me that Vernon County moved from administrator to administrative coordinator. So awesome. This map is great. It's nice and colorful and it's pretty, but Vernon County is shaded wrong. So actually it's 32 administrator counties, and Vernon County went back to administrative coordinator. And if you're interested in why Vernon County made that move, I encourage you to reach out to their board and speak with them about the considerations that they went through. Jake, anything you wanted to add on this slide before we move on?
No, I have a couple comments, I think, for the next couple slides.
Okay. All right. So looking at this, I just want to briefly provide, again, the what could you do, not what should you do, but what could you do? Let's talk about the statutory authority of the 3 different forms: executive, administrator, and administrative coordinator, starting first with county executive under 59.17. County executive appoints and supervises department heads subject to board confirmation, appoints members to statutory boards and commissions, not committees, not county board committees, but statutory boards and commissions, submits an annual budget to the county board, coordinates and directs administrative and management functions of the county government, and has veto authority. That veto authority extends to ordinances and resolutions, and frankly has broader veto authority than the governor has under the Wisconsin Constitution. The board retains the opportunity to override a county executive's veto by 2/3 vote. And so when we look at the role of the county executive, at least in my mind, and I'm sure Josh and Jake would likely agree, is that it's very similar to the role of the governor in state government, because you've got the legislative branch in state government, the assembly and the Senate, and then you've got the executive branch, the governor. And if we look at the powers of the governor as it relates to the introduction of a budget and veto authority over legislation, very similar to what we have in county government. Same with the appointment of cabinet within state government. We got appointment of department heads within county government. So that's the executive model. Then we go to county administrator. The county administrator is the chief administrator of the county. And for anybody who can tell me what the difference between chief executive and chief administrator is, I'm going to send you a nice gift. I cannot tell you for the life of me the definitional difference between the term executive and administrator as it relates to the role of the county administrator and the role of the county executive within county government. Now, I understand the county executive is elected at large by the citizens. I get that. County administrator is appointed by the county board. Okay, so much different in terms of who the administrator or the executive is ultimately accountable to. But as it relates to the role of the administrator within 59.18, you're going to see a lot of similarities between administrator and executive. The administrator presents a budget to the board. The administrator appoints and supervises department heads. The administrator makes appointments to statutory boards and commissions subject to board confirmation. And so you see a lot of similarities, but again, big difference between executive and administrator. Number one, executive elected at large. Number two, executive has veto authority on issues, on legislative issues emanating from the county board. But I'd be really interested in Josh's take on what he has seen firsthand in terms of, in Washington County, the difference between administrator and executive.
I'm going to take you up on that free lunch. I'll tell you what the difference is. The difference is informal authority. And what I mean by that, it boils down to who you report to, which you touched on. As county, and I underappreciated this going from county administrator to county exec, because as you alluded to, statutorily, it looks like you're doing the same job. The informal authority that the county executive can utilize is a lot farther and larger than you would think it would be, just by reading it on paper or reading through the statute book. And I think it makes sense when you think about it in theory. I had to go knock doors. I had to talk to constituents. I'm constantly out in the community as county executive. As county administrator at supervisors, that was my constituency. That was who I reported to, who I cared about, who I was responsive to. And no matter how good of an administrator you are, and I know a lot of really good administrators, sorry to offend any of the administrators on the call, but the reality is they'll never be able to connect with the constituency at that level. It's just not the function of the job, which brings up a really, really important point about whatever decision you make as regard to form of government. What I have learned in 15 years, and I was trained as a public administrator, what I have learned in 15 years is for any of these to work, you have to have a very strong chief elected official, county board chair, for example, or county executive, and you have to have a very strong and competent administrator. Could be a director of administration, but it could be a county administrator, could be an administrative coordinator. Those two functions have to go with one another. When one is stronger or weaker, the organization begins to suffer. And ultimately, it goes back to the why. Programming suffer, even if you can't see it initially. So I think one thing I'd like you to walk away with from this entire discussion is that you have to have a strong chief elected official that is supported by county board supervisors or by the community at large through the county executive office. And you have to have an administrator who's empowered, or administrative coordinator who's empowered to carry out the will of the board, carry out the will of the elected officials. And I think that that is a major difference, where they may look similar on paper, but the reality is they're just functionally different positions.
Thank you, Josh. Those are all very good points. And I am sitting here embarrassingly admitting another error on the map. Our good friends in Trempealeau County recently switched from administrative coordinator over to administrator. So Sarah, I need to figure out a good way to update this map right quick because we have 2 errors. But I think this goes to show that this is not static, and it hasn't been static for many years, meaning that I think counties, to their credit, are going through an evaluation process of saying, how do we best organize to efficiently deliver these services? To Josh's point, do we have administration that we trust with the policy decisions that are made at the board level that we make day in, day out? Do we trust that we have good administration to carry out that policy? And if not, if the answer is no, what are the options that we have to try to create that strong administration that we know is going to be dedicated to the best interests of our citizens? Jake, anything you wanted to add?
I'm waiting for the next slide.
Okay, take it, go.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I specifically wanted to wait for this language. So I pulled up chapter 5919, and we have that direct quote, because if you look at 5919, it is a short paragraph. Right, it is there's not a lot there, but there is this sentence. This is the last sentence in 5919, which is just one paragraph. The administrative coordinator shall be responsible for coordinating all administrative and management functions of the county government, not otherwise vested by law in boards or commissions or in other elected officers. So Josh, I think, made a really important point regarding empowerment. Now, I'm probably going to take it a little out of context, but I think that's a really important concept. And, we have a couple counties we're working with right now where, a lot of the issues they're dealing with, I think, can be managed by that administrative coordinator, but it takes a very intentional decision on the part of the board to empower that person. And I think if you look at 5919, the legislature did intend for that position to be a position that can actually coordinate. Now, Andy always alludes to the fact that a lot of the language in chapter 59 is somewhat ambiguous. What does it mean to actually coordinate, right? I mean, I think it's going to depend on the county, but I think, and I'm speaking generally here, but we've seen it in specific counties where I think it's a mistake to not at least, give some thought and really try to empower that position so that even if it's just, right, I'm using air quotes, just administrative coordinator, that person still should have a very distinct role within county administration, obviously working in probably closer coordination with the county board than maybe you would see in the other 2 models. But I think it's a mistake to just identify just somebody in the county to have that role. Maybe they wear 2 hats, right? As Andy pointed out in the map, it's a very diverse group of positions that can have this role. In some counties, it's standalone position. And so certainly if you're in one of those counties, the county board should be giving kind of clear direction to what that person's role and responsibility should be, particularly if that is their one job, right? If you're going to spend the resources and take the time to actually put somebody in that position, then they need to, be empowered to actually help you carry out the administrative functions for the county. But I would argue, even if it is just kind of an add-on to your clerk, your HR director, your corp counsel, whomever it may be, that they still are empowered to help the county board carry out those administrative functions. And I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I just think it's a mistake to not look closely at that language in 5919 and realize that you can empower that person to actually carry out some of these administrative functions and to actually coordinate and help the board coordinate activities.
Yeah, and so early on, I said everybody else gets lumped into administrative coordinator. If you're not exec, you're not administrator, you're administrative coordinator. And I had said that when you get to the language of the statute, you can understand why I describe it that way. If you look at 59.17 with executive, 59.18 with administrator, they're very specific about what it is that that role is expected to do and how a person gets into that role. With executive, they're elected. With administrator, they're appointed by the county board based solely on merit, and that administrator serves at the pleasure of the county board. Administrative coordinator, as Jake said, is one paragraph. That's it. And I've seen it described, whether, and this I've seen described by many people. It's similar to county administrator, but does not have appointment authority and coordinates rather than supervises. What? And I always ask that question. What does that mean? What does it mean that you coordinate rather than supervise? Does that mean you're a paper pusher? Well, no, Andy, that's offensive. I do a lot more than push paper. Okay, then what do you do? And it varies county by county as it relates to the administrative coordinator position. In some counties, I've seen administrative coordinators who do everything exactly like a county administrator does. They're just not a county administrator. So you ask the question, well, why is it that you have an administrative coordinator that does everything that a county administrator does, but you don't pull the trigger on making that person an administrator? And some county boards say, well, we just don't want to give up that authority. I would say, I don't know what authority you're giving up because you already have it in ordinance, what it is that this role does. But okay, if that's what you want to do as a county, that's what you can do. And 59.19 gives you the flexibility to define that position. And again, of all of the counties that have that, I think it's 27 have that different model, 28, they do it all differently. As much as all of them have the administrative coordinator model, they all do it differently. Every county with a county administrator is governed by 5918 in terms of that administrator's role. And every county that has an executive is defined by 5917.
I didn't do anything. I'm just sitting here.
Hey, Jake, you're not on mute. Thanks. And so when we look at 59.19 in administrative coordinator and you say, what could we do? Even if you're saying as a county, we don't want to move toward an administrator model or an executive model, shouldn't we have a discussion about what is the role of our administrative coordinator and have we adequately defined that role within our own ordinances, within our own policy book? And I think, Josh, you ran into some of that as county manager in Washington County, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and just the name itself, I think articulates the problem. There's no such thing as a county manager. It's a manufactured position trying to put boundaries around what an administrative coordinator means. Out of the three positions, I will tell you unequivocally, no questions asked, the hardest one for me to work under was administrative coordinator, because even as you try to define it by titling a county manager, by putting job description to it, by trying to have an organizational chart that flows, it creates a lot of problems, which the county administrator streamlines. Specifically, what we found was, as administrative coordinator, I believe if I remember this correctly, we had 19 department heads, 13 who reported to me as county manager. There was 13 different ways to hire and fire those positions, and they all had to flow through committee. So every time we had a change in position, we had to break out the statute book, break out the county code, go through the process and make sure we weren't missing something. County administrator streamlines all of that. And to my point earlier, the importance of having that strong chief elected official in tandem with the administrative position is that it's the same thing as the federal level in terms of the checks and balances. It makes sure that the county board is really the one that retains the authority, whether it's administrator or administrative coordinator. And ultimately, to me, that is the key. The elected officials are the ones responsible to the people. When we try to go back to starting with why, we exist for the people of our individual counties, for the people of the state of Wisconsin. And the elected officials are the ones that serve them. Everybody else, administrator, when I was in that position, administrative coordinator, serves at the will of that board, which is ostensibly at the will of the people. So making sure that having that clear chain of command, I think the easiest way, I've got some charts and graphs that I'd be happy to share with any counties who are interested that are really try to articulate that the administrator job is there, keep this in mind, full-time, sometimes literally 24/7, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day at least. They're doing the job all the time. As elected county supervisors, sometimes it's just a couple hours a month. Other times, county board chairs are there 30 or 40 hours a week. So the range of the difference in the information you can accumulate just by itself, I think makes the job of the administrative coordinator quite challenging. When I was administrative coordinator, I had 30 county board supervisors. I have all those different ways of doing things, and I'm trying to respond to 30 bosses. It is a very challenging job. I tip my hat to anybody who does that work, because I used to always share a slide with county board supervisors that said, my title shouldn't be county manager, it should be official cat herder, because it was that difficult. 30 elected people that I'm responding to, 19 different department heads that I'm trying to coordinate, and at the same time responding to constituents on behalf of both. So it is something, to Andy's point, the more you can put parameters around it and be clear about what that informal authority is, the better off it is going to be for your organization and for the delivery of programs and services to constituents.
So we've got this chart in the presentation. I'm not going to go through it, but it will be in the slide deck that will be available at wicounties.org. And it has a column showing each for executive, administrator, and administrative coordinator. And on the left-hand side, you'll see a topic, and then it's addressed within the chart. And so there, in black and white, you can see the differences as it relates to statutory authority. Again, not what should you do, but what is legally available to you in terms of the options. So take a look at that chart, and you can take a look at those differences. So we have those administrative options within county government, but the one constant that we have in every single county, we don't have a choice on this, we have this in every single county, is we have a county board of supervisors. And unlike our counterparts in state government or federal government, or for that matter, city government, we don't have a clear delineation of branches of county government baked into Chapter 59. I mean, when we look at Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 of the federal Constitution, the US Constitution, we know that there is an executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch, separate articles of the Constitution. Chapter 59 is not organized that way. And again, that's because counties are unique in terms of what it is that we are asked to do. And so if you look at Chapter 59, you're not going to find the delineation, but I will tell you that baked into that entire chapter is the notion that county boards serve a legislative function. County boards make policy. Individual county board supervisors do not have individual decision-making authority. A county board chair is the leader of the legislative body. The highway committee chair is the leader of the highway committee, and so on. That person, he or she does not have individual decision-making authority as it relates to the operations of county government, okay? And so I've often said this too, is that if I had my druthers, I would go through Chapter 59 of the statutes and white out the word supervisor and replace it with member. If we called ourselves county board members, member means I'm part of something bigger than me. That's what a county board supervisor is. And so I think we would avoid some confusion if we just got rid of the term supervisor, which is a historical term. So again, county boards as a legislative body adopt policy, administration carries out that policy, and you have to decide as a county which is the best model by which to carry out the policy direction established by the county board. So again, if we look at the functions of the county board, there's a list of functions here that county boards do, and all of that relates again back to the policymaking prerogative of the county board. But I think, again, if we look at the really important bullet points on here, at least in my estimation, number one, you got to adopt an annual budget and levy taxes. You're going to go out and ask the citizens to invest their hard-earned money in you as a county to deliver the services that are critical to all these citizens, decide the level of services, eliminate some services, add new services, do different things, all the while being accountable to the general public to make those decisions. That's a very important task. And then the second to last bullet point here, establish the county's vision. What is it that we want to be as a county? Now, the reason I point out these two bullet points is that they are somewhat in conflict. How is it that we are to establish a long-range vision for the county when we have a couple of really big hurdles in our way? Number one, We go through an annual budget process. And so every year we're going to have a debate about the level of services we provide and what taxes we're going to levy to support those services. So how can we have a long range vision when every year we have to have this grand debate about our budget? Impediment number two, what's happening next spring? Next spring, we're going to elect every single county board member that's currently sitting in the state of Wisconsin. Every 2 years, we elect new county boards. Now, we know there's never going to be 100% turnover, but in the last election cycle in 2022, we had significant turnover. It was, I think, over a third. And so when we have that level of turnover, how can we create the momentum to implement a strategic vision for the county? It's a hurdle. I don't have an answer for that. I don't, but it takes dedication. It takes time to establish that strategic vision. In my estimation, again, I never sat in your seat. And so I give all the credit in the world to the county board members who are out there, because I've seen your paychecks and you're not doing it for the money. All right, that I can guarantee. What I can tell you, though, is that your love for your county means that you ought to make it a priority to establish that vision for your county. Jake, anything you wanted to add on that? Assuming you have audio back, because
Yeah, I'm
it seems
sorry
the only audio that we pick up is you complaining about the fact that you don't have audio. We got that okay, but
sorry
anything you
about
wanted to
that.
add? That's all right.
No, I mean, I would echo the comment that, on the one hand, they those kind of principles do seem in conflict, but when we give this presentation, when we talk to county boards, I think a lot of light bulbs go off in the room, and I can speak from experience. And I've told this story on day one as a county supervisor, thinking I need to go to every single office and talk to every employee, and this is going to be a lot of work because I need to micromanage. I probably even told myself that. And then thankfully I was on a really good board. We probably had a training from an attorney, Phillips, at some point. And I started to realize, no, that's not really what your job is as a county supervisor, right? You're thinking long-term, making the big policy decisions. We always make the point that, we're not suggesting at all that the role of a board should be minimized, right? In fact, it's the exact opposite, that if you're a county supervisor, if you're the board, you're tasked with kind of that long-term planning. What does the county look like in a year, 5, 10 years, right? To be that visionary. And if that's what you're focused on, yeah, there could be turnover in the board. There's still going to be hot button issues that you need to take care of year to year. But just like a corporation, just like a business, when you're, and Andy always makes a point, there's key differences between government and business, but kind of this concept of long-term planning is the same thing. And so, I agree with Andy's point, but I also think if you can get yourself as a board to start thinking in terms of long-term planning and kind of being those visionaries, then the year-over-year change in a budget, the 2-year-over-2-year change in a county board, it's not going to be as significant, assuming you can have agreement on kind of those core principles.
The last thing I'm going to add is I've seen a couple of comments in chat from our friends in Barron County and Kewaunee County and other counties, frankly, that have been through the transition from administrative coordinator to administrator. And we've had continuity with some of the folks that serve in both capacities. And so you've got resources around the state. Josh is obviously a fantastic resource, but there are other resources out there. You might have a desire to talk with Jeff French if you're one of the northern counties, because the issues in Barron County are probably a little different than the issues they confront in Washington County. So if that's the case, reach out to Jeff and have that discussion. In other words, we have a lot of resources available to assist with this process. And for that matter, Jake, me, Sarah, WCA, we've been in a lot of different counties, north, south, east, and west. And so we are available to assist in the discussion. You're never going to hear from us, this is what you have to do or what you should do. You're never going to hear that out of us. We have opinions, and our opinions are formed based upon our own review of situations and our own experiences, but they're just that, they're opinions. They're worth no more or no less than anybody else's opinion. So feel free to ask Andy's opinion or Jake's opinion or Josh's opinion. We may not have the same opinion on all of this, which is fine. That's why they're called opinions, not facts. Take all the information and use the resources that are at your disposal. And if you're going through this, just know that, don't be intimidated by all of the information that's out there. There is a way to get through this, and let us know how we can help with that. Josh, anything you wanted to add on county board functions or the last point I made?
Yeah. And I'm just going to disagree with your opinion. We can discuss this over the lunch you now owe me. But the last two of the last 3 bullets there, I think this is the material difference between administrative coordinator and administrator versus county executive. And I know you have it under a county board function here, but as the elected county executive, vision, mission, and purpose really drive what this job is and does. Now, I'm a firm believer in a shared vision, mission, purpose. I also use the term vision, mission, values. That has to be something the board and the executive work on. But to the point of opinion, I mean, oftentimes, obviously we see it at the federal level. It's different parties. Same thing happens sometimes at the local level. We're bringing different perspectives, so there may not be pure unanimity in vision, mission, and purpose. But as county executive, that is something materially different from when I was administrator or administrative coordinator. I'm bringing my vision to the role. I literally knock doors telling people this is where I see Washington County in 2050 and beyond. I believe this is why government exists. This is the mission. This is what we do. This is our why, to go back to the comments earlier. As administrator, we adopted the first ever vision, mission, values strategic plan here in Washington County. But I didn't cast that vision as county administrator. The board drove that entire process. I facilitated it. I was certainly part of it. I was trying to listen to what it was they were saying and interpret it into how do we make this actually workable at the government level. But I think that's a humongous difference between county executive and county administrator, administrative coordinator. And I think it highlights the beginning of the conversation. And that is there's tipping points to when that's necessary. Chances are, if you have 10,000 people in your county and 30 elected county board supervisors, they're pretty darn close to them. They know a lot of those people by their first name. On the other hand, if you're a county like Waukesha County, you're approaching 500,000 people and you have 20 some county board supervisors, chances are you know a fraction of those people. Now having that elected position for the whole entire county, maybe it does make sense. So I think those two things, yes, they are county board functions. That county board has a role in that. But once you introduce the county executive, the county executive is starting to play in this space a little bit, and you need to know that walking in.
Absolutely. And that dovetails into a question that we got in Q&A. Has the county ever gone from county executive back to administrator? I'm not aware of any. I don't think Jake, Josh, you guys are aware of any, are you? I've never seen a county do that.
No.
My understanding of when we went through this process to go to county executive was it would require a referendum. The people would have to vote to undo themselves from county executive.
That's right. It's never been done to the best of my recollection. All right, so here's how I like to describe the roles of the board and the roles of administration. I view both of them as having dual roles. The first preeminent role within the board is to enact policy. The second role is to hold administration accountable for implementing the policy consistent with the direction provided by the board. And then when we look at the role of administration, preeminent role is to implement policy. And then also it has an obligation. Administration is obliged to provide the board with the information necessary for the board to make an informed policy decision. And so this is, again, oversimplification about the role of the board and the role of administration. You're not going to find this anywhere in chapter 59, but I do think that these concepts are hard-baked, hard-coded into chapter 59. And if we understand this and have a discussion about how do we make sure that this is exactly the lane that we are operating in, I think that you're going to find that you're a lot more efficient in terms of how you conduct business at the county level. And as well, it's going to help you decide what model works best for us, executive administrator, administrative coordinator. So I'm going to I talked at the beginning about a philosophical discussion. Nobody has seen this slide ever before in any one of my presentations or anybody else, but I was talking with Sarah about this because we both read an article from ICMA, the International City County Managers Association, which I know, Josh, you were quite involved with back in the day. They probably still are. A great organization, but and just as their name suggests, they are very, very big in terms of their scope all over the United States, and in fact, outside of our borders. And so they took a look at the role of city council or county board and the role of county manager, city manager, executive, whatever it was at the administrative level within cities and counties. And they started asking questions about what it is that you think your role is as, and in this circumstance, it was as a city council member or as a county board member. And they identified 6 different areas. Strategic vision, big picture thinker, that strategic plan that we talked about earlier. Trustee or steward, somebody who is acting in a representative capacity, taking care of people's problems and money as it relates to levying taxes. Representative capacity, being an advocate for the citizens that the person serves. Community builder, bringing people together, having interactions with our municipal counterparts, state government, and so on to solve problems. Decision maker, obviously, you're going to be a decision maker when you're asked to make a decision as it relates to a matter coming before the board. And then oversight, management of the administrative portion within your county. So I asked the question here on the slide. Where's your board sit on this list in terms of priorities? Where should you be? And how can administration help you? Because I often think, from what I heard, and this is anecdotal, this is by no means the majority of counties out there, but I often think that county boards feel like they have to shoulder the entire burden of answering these questions themselves. When in reality, I think that we have many, many, many counties with very talented people sitting in administration that can assist counties with going through the process of thinking about these various governance roles and how to prioritize the various governance roles to the extent that they feel like they need to be reprioritized. What do I mean by prioritizing? Well, what ICMA found in their survey and in their interview process is that there were a heck of a lot of city council and county board members who were engaged primarily in oversight. They were looking at the performance of the administrative branch, evaluating that performance and dealing with issues with that performance. And I think the overwhelming majority of the counties and cities that fell in that category said, that's just, it's tiring. Day to day, it's tiring. And it's making me not like my job. I'd rather get back into this visionary role where I can establish priorities and I have faith that administration is going to carry it out. So how do I do that? How do I get to that point? And I think if you talk to administrators out there who have a city council or county board that is primarily engaged in that oversight function, they're going to use the dreaded M word. Jake, what's the M word? Starts with micro and ends with manage.
Micromanage, or I
Very
didn't know
good.
monetize.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
I knew we
There
were
you
going
go.
with this.
There you go. It's micromanage. And I mean, it's funny because when we get into these discussions, sometimes we get into these meetings where we're having this discussion about roles and responsibilities. We've got county staff in the back of the room. We've got county board that is seated in front of staff, and county board is all looking at me. And I say, county board, don't turn around. All right. But I'm going to ask this question right now. How many of you think that the county board micromanages? And every staff member in the back of the room is shooting up in the air with their hand. And you have a couple of county board members that sheepishly raise their hand. And so I say, okay, I'm going to tell you right now that your staff thinks you micromanage. That could be one of 2 problems. First problem is you actually do micromanage, which can be a problem, and we need to address that. Or there may be a definitional issue. What staff construes as micromanagement is just simply creating an accountability mechanism. And so let's have this discussion about what it is that we want to prioritize in governance within the county, and then how do we ask administration to help us make sure we are prioritizing things the right way, and how do we organize ourselves so that we are providing the best model to provide efficient services to our citizens. So I know that we are at our time. I've got additional comments here. So I am going to turn it over first to you, Josh, for any closing comments that you might have.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me with you. Happy to, as Andy said, be a resource to any county that's having these discussions, going through these conversations, really any organizational structure process that you're going through. It's been quite an adventure for 10 years here in Washington County, and I think we'd be nothing but happy to assist anybody else in going through that as well, because they are challenging and difficult conversations. The slide of ICMA 6 governance roles, I'm going to point to a name that was on the bottom of the credits there, Nalbandian. John Nalbandian, it was a professor. He's a professor emeritus from Kansas University, Master of Public Administration program. And honest, I've seen him talk many times. He is, in my opinion, he is the smartest, most articulate explainer of this administration and politics dichotomy that there is. if I would highly recommend finding any articles from him or materials from him. I have a lot of materials that I've gotten from him over the years at his presentations. I'm happy to share those. But the thing that makes, he was the chair of the Master of Public Administration program at Kansas. But that's not what makes him most interesting. What makes him most interesting is he was also mayor of the local community that he lived in, near Kansas University. And he came at his work from that perspective. He is literally the one who taught me, and although it took a while to get it into my thick skull, that the chief elected official and the chief administrative officer have to work in tandem. That strategic vision at the top of this document can't happen without the both of those working well together. To Andy's point, too much oversight work starts to destroy the first five, and you kind of forget the reason that you exist. So I highly recommend anybody going through this process, even those in county executive forms of government, to reference Professor Nalbandian. And once again, thank you for the opportunity, and happy to support any of you going through these discussions or these transitions.
Thanks for your time, Josh. Your insight is incredibly important and invaluable. Thanks for all you do for county government, and thanks for your help. Jake, anything you wanted to add in closing?
So first, again, sorry for the technical difficulties. No, I guess I'll we've been talking about county executive. I'll just close with, we work with a lot of counties on the coordinator side, and again, I'll just make the point, like, that position is not window dressing, right? The state statutes contemplate that position actually being an individual, whether that's their sole responsibility or in conjunction with another role that they have, whether elected or appointed, right? Whatever their other position in county government is, that they actually should be a resource for the county board to assist in the coordination of the county administration. And so we have several counties that we're working with that are in that coordinator model, but have great people in those roles. And the boards that we're working with, I think, are recognizing that, are at least attempting to empower that person in that position to actually help them with administration, knowing that they can't really be focusing on policy and long-term planning when they are micromanaging the day-to-day operations. So empower that coordinator, let them carry out that function so that they can start being those visionaries.
Thank you, Jake. And the thing I'm going to end with, I know, Sarah, this is near and dear to your heart. We're here to help. Sarah spends her entire life in these types of conversations with counties. And so whatever we can do to assist counties in making sure that they are comfortable and succeeding with their organizational model, we are happy to do it. So with that, Sarah, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thanks, Andy. And thanks to Andy, Jake, and Josh for an outstanding presentation today. Andy already took one of my closing comments about folks should feel free to reach out to the association or to any of our speakers with regard to any questions or assistance you may need in navigating your county administrative options. Our webinar, this webinar and the materials will be on the WCA website again, hopefully by the end of this week. A couple other quick announcements here. One final one. In the boardroom, we are taking a break in November, but we will be back twice in December on the 13th and the 20th to discuss, and Andy, I don't know if you'll like this description or not, but I'm going to say it anyway, to discuss how to create the ideal set of county board rules. Something you and I have talked about doing.
That's setting the bar pretty high, Sarah. Thanks. No pressure at all.
No pressure at all for December, since we're not meeting in November.
I can tell, I've seen so many issues with county board rules. I've seen so many issues with county board rules over the last couple of months. I cannot wait for this discussion. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, and I have a list of things, Andy, I need to make sure we talk about during that as well. Again, thanks to our speakers and thanks to everyone in the county family who has joined us today. That will do it for our October edition of In the Boardroom, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.